Was Japan a victim or an aggressor in the Second World War? A non-Japanese person would most likely answer that Japan was an aggressor. On the other hand, a Japanese person would probably say that she was a victim. How come Japanese and foreign people have a different perspective on the same event? The answer to this question is Japanese revisionism. When Japan invaded China on July 7, 1937, they committed a series of war crimes, such as forced labor and sexual assault on women and young girls. Japan denies all these events. But to what extent? The Japanese state has never apologized for the rape of Nanking, a massacre in the then Chinese capital city by the Japanese army, who killed 300,000 people and raped 80,000 women in only a month. In fact, the Japanese government does not even acknowledge that the massacre ever happened. In the official website of the Japanese government, they have a section dedicated to the country's rich history. They have 178 articles talking about the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings, 56 articles talking about Pearl Harbor, and 4 articles about the Tripartite Act, but 0 articles about the Nanking Massacre. In 1990, Shintaro Ishihara, the governor of Tokyo, formally denied the Nanking Massacre. In an interview with the American magazine Playboy, he claimed that according to Japanese sources, the massacre never happened. People say that the Japanese made a Holocaust there, but that is not true. It is a story made up by the Chinese. However, the Japanese did not always deny the massacre. When Japan took over Nanking, news about the atrocities stamped the front page of newspapers in Tokyo, and the population was prideful over their wartime actions. Denial of the massacre only began after the West started to criticize Japan for its actions, and the cover-up of the facts became even more significant after the rise of Japan's right-wing party in 1972. Since then, Japan has seen many other nationalistic leaders ruling the country, like Shinzo Abe. These leaders have never openly talked about the massacre. The nationalistic view of politicians on this event reflects on what is taught to the Japanese citizens. When Japan opened the National Museum of World War II in Chiyoda, most outsiders were shocked by the biased content found inside the museum. In there, the Nanking Massacre is not mentioned. Instead, they focus on the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings. Another well-known example of biased and misleading sources put up by the Japanese government to its citizens are school textbooks. In 1982, the Japanese Ministry of Education headed the campaign to rewrite the events of World War II in the history books. Since then, most school textbooks censor the truth about the massacre. Words such as aggression have been replaced by advancing in and out. In many textbooks, the massacre is still referred to as an incident. In those textbooks, historians talk about how the death toll claimed by the Chinese is a great exaggeration, stating it was between 13,000 and 20,000 people, when it was in reality 300,000. The publisher of Japan's authorized history textbooks described the Nanking Massacre as communist propaganda. Japan went as far as sending diplomats to other countries to demand that authors and publishers change what they had written about the Nanking Massacre in books and school textbooks. This new program began during the Abe administration. This proves that Japan's biased and revisionistic views of the event are not evolving. Not only school textbooks are censored. In the film The Last Emperor, the film's distribution company in Japan removed a scene depicting the Nanking Massacre because it was too gruesome and would not serve the morale of the country. Another common example is the censorship of Irish Chang's famous book, The Rape of Nanking. The book was censored because critics said the images were fabricated and the content was false and fictitious. The book was only translated to Japanese 10 years after it was first written. The government is not the only entity trying to hide the facts. This massacre is kept secret by various sectors of society, The managers of NHK, Japan's biggest TV channel, openly deny the massacre. The CEO of the largest hotel chain in Japan, APA Hotels, wrote a book that is found in all the 32,600 rooms of his hotels called The Real History of Japan. In this book, he talks about the fabrication of the massacre and states that all the killings that happened in Nanking were carried out by the Chinese. Those who try to speak out against the revisionism are threatened. Tamaki Matsuoko, a history teacher who has produced the documentary Torn Memories of Nanking, said she has suffered intimidations and threats from extremists. Unlike Nazi Germany, Japan was not pressured by the Allies to convict war criminals. The IMTFE, the tribunal responsible for convicting Japanese war criminals, had many flaws. For instance, major players in the event, such as Prince Asaka, one of the commanders of the Japanese forces in Nanking, were granted immunity. Nazi Germany had tens of thousands of war criminals convicted, whereas Japan only had 25. The IMTFE was eventually canceled, as the U.S. wanted to ally with Japan after the Chinese Communist Revolution. Still today, there are no efforts by the Japanese government to try to arrest Japanese war criminals. Japan took a different path from its then ally Germany, who acknowledged all of its war crimes and apologized to the Jewish people. Japan's revisionism is a concept that has been hurting Japan's relationship with its neighbors for the past century. China and Japan, for example, still have poor diplomatic ties, and a large percentage of Chinese hate Japan. This incorrect and biased view of the war is hurting Japanese society.